Abandoned by her husband, she undergoes a stunning transformation, and he begs for reconciliation. Hi, my beautiful story readers. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. Today is a very special day. It's my birthday. I would love to hear your beautiful wishes in the comments, and I'd also really appreciate your feedback. Do you enjoy the stories I share? Is there anything you'd like to see more of, or any improvements you'd suggest? Your thoughts mean the world to me. Now let's dive into the story together. Thank you for being here and making this day even more special. The divorce papers lay on the Italian marble countertop like a white flag of surrender, their crisp edges mocking the chaos in Avalon Pierce's heart. She traced her fingertips over the embossed letterhead of Carter and Associates, the prestigious law firm Xavier had chosen, because God forbid their divorce be handled by anyone less than Manhattan's elite. The morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Tribeca penthouse caught the diamond in her wedding ring, scattering prisms across the document that would end 7 years of what she'd thought was an unshakable love story. "I just need time to think," Xavier had said 3 months ago, his steel-grey eyes fixed on his custom-made Oxford shoes, rather than meeting her gaze. The same eyes that had once looked at her with such intensity across crowded college lecture halls now couldn't bear to witness the devastation they'd caused. "It's not what you think, Avalon. It's complicated." Complicated. As if that single word could encompass the entirety of what he'd done. As if it could explain away the lipstick stains she'd found on his collar last Christmas, or the mysterious lunch meetings that always ran late, or the way his phone would suddenly go silent whenever she entered their bedroom. The scent of vanilla and warm butter wafted up from the kitchen of her artisanal bakery 17 floors below. Sweet surrender. The business she'd built from scratch while Xavier climbed the corporate ladder at Pearson Hamilton Investment Banking. Her staff would be preparing for the morning rush now, crafting the croissants and pain au chocolat that had earned them a mention in New York Magazine's Best of the City issue last spring. An achievement Xavier had been too busy to celebrate, his calendar mysteriously full the night of the award ceremony. Avalon's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, thumb hovering over the Instagram icon. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't, but like pressing on a bruise to feel its tenderness, she found herself typing in a name that had become both familiar and foreign. Celeste Blackwood. The photos loaded instantly, a parade of perfection, wrapped in designer dresses and sophistication. Celeste, Xavier's "it's complicated" explanation, was everything Avalon had never tried to be. The latest post showed her at Le Bernardin, her perfectly manicured hand wrapped around a champagne flute, the caption reading, "Life's greatest adventures begin with a leap of faith." The timestamp, last night, when Xavier had claimed he was working late on the Singapore merger. The memory of yesterday morning crashed over her like a wave. Xavier standing in this very kitchen, his Tom Ford suit impeccable as always, delivering the final blow with corporate precision. "I never meant for it to happen this way," he'd said, placing the divorce papers on the counter with the same care he used to handle million-dollar contracts. "But Celeste understands my world, Avalon. She moves in the circles I need to be in. She's ambitious, connected, sophisticated." The unspoken comparison hung in the air between them. "Unlike you, with your flour-dusted aprons and simple dreams of making people happy through food. Never mind that Sweet Surrender had been featured in food magazines, or that celebrity customers regularly ordered her custom creations. In Xavier's world, success was measured in stock portfolios and social connections, not the ability to craft the perfect eclair. Avalon rose from the kitchen bar stool, her bare feet silent against the heated marble floors she'd once thought of as the height of luxury. Now they just felt cold. She walked to the window wall that overlooked the Manhattan skyline, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. 7 years ago, she'd stood in this same spot on the day they moved in, Xavier's arms wrapped around her waist as they watched the sunset paint the city gold. "We're going to build an amazing life here," he'd promised, kissing her temple. "Together, we'll conquer the world." She hadn't realized then that together had an expiration date, or that conquering the world meant he'd eventually want someone who already lived in the rarefied air of Manhattan's elite, rather than a woman who'd worked her way up from a tiny bakery in Queens. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sage, her best friend since culinary school. "I'm downstairs with emergency supplies, wine, ice cream, and the number of the best divorce attorney in New York. Let me up." A sob caught in Avalon's throat, but she swallowed it back. Crying wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't erase the fact that while she'd been building her business and planning their future, Xavier had been building a new life with someone else. It wouldn't change the whispers she'd surely face at charity galas and social events, the pitying looks from the society women who'd probably seen this coming long before she had. She glanced at her reflection in the window, honey blonde hair falling in gentle waves past her shoulders, the same style she'd worn since college because Xavier once said it made her look like a Renaissance angel. Emerald eyes that people always complimented, but that she'd never quite learned to see as remarkable. The simple elegance of her white cashmere sweater and dark jeans, expensive but understated, like everything else in her carefully curated life. But as she studied herself more closely, she noticed something different. Beneath the hurt in her eyes, past the tremble in her lips, there was something else. A spark. A glimmer of something that looked surprisingly like freedom. "Come up," she texted Sage. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she pulled off her wedding ring, all 3.5 carats of it, chosen to impress Xavier's colleagues rather than match her own tastes. The platinum band made a satisfying clink as she set it beside the divorce papers. Walking into their master bathroom, Avalon opened the cabinet beneath the sink and pulled out the box of hair dye she'd impulse purchased last week, the one she'd hidden away because Xavier had always insisted he loved her natural color. The rich auburn shade had called to her from the store shelf, promising transformation. Her phone buzzed again, another notification from Instagram. Celeste had posted a new story, this time from Xavier's favorite restaurant. In the background, Avalon could make out her husband's familiar profile, his face lit by candlelight as he gazed at his companion with the kind of admiration he used to reserve for her. Something inside Avalon shifted, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. The woman who had spent 7 years trying to fit into Xavier's world, carefully measuring her words and actions to match his expectations, took a step back. In her place stood someone new, someone who felt the weight of possibility more than the burden of loss. The doorbell chimed, Sage, armed with wine and wisdom. But before opening it, Avalon took one last look in the mirror. "The thing about shattered mirrors," she whispered to her reflection, remembering something her grandmother used to say, is that each broken piece shows you a different perspective of yourself. She touched her hair, imagining the warm, auburn tone that would soon replace the safe, expected blonde. It would be the first of many changes, she decided, not because Xavier had deemed her insufficient, but because for the first time in 7 years she felt truly free to discover who she could become. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Avalon straightened her shoulders and turned away from the mirror. Beyond that door waited not just her best friend, but the first page of a new chapter, one where she would no longer be a supporting character in someone else's story, but the author of her own. Chapter 2. Seeds of Change. Sage's wine-fueled pep talk from the previous night still echoed in Avalon's mind as she stood before the floor-length mirror in her walk-in closet. The morning light filtered through the custom window treatments she'd once spent weeks selecting with an overpriced interior designer, all to match Xavier's vision of their perfect life. Now, each carefully curated piece felt like a costume from a play she'd finally stopped performing. "First things first," she muttered, channeling Sage's practical wisdom as she surveyed her designer wardrobe. The clothes told the story of who she'd been trying to be. Alexander McQueen blazers in safe neutrals, Chanel tweed sets that screamed banker's wife, and an army of Louboutins she'd learned to walk in because Xavier liked her in heels. Her fingers trailed across the fabrics, each piece holding a memory. The ivory Valentino dress she'd worn to last year's charity gala, where she'd first noticed Xavier's lingering glances at Celeste. The Hermès scarf he'd given her for their anniversary, probably chosen by his assistant. The Saint Laurent cocktail dress she'd bought for their last date night. The one he'd cancelled for an emergency meeting that had later appeared on Celeste's Instagram story, hashtagged d'un spontaneous dinner. "Time for a clear-out," Avalon declared to her reflection. She grabbed her phone and opened the luxury resale app Sage had recommended. Within hours, her closet would be listed, transformed from a museum of failed expectations into seed money for her reinvention. The first piece she photographed was her engagement ring, all 3.5 carats of brilliant cut perfection. Xavier had chosen it from Cartier, proud of how its size would impress his colleagues. "It's perfect," she remembered saying, even as the weight of it had felt foreign on her finger. Now she knew better. Perfect wasn't about size or brand names, it was about authenticity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sage. "Ready for phase 2. My guy Marco at Fekai is waiting. Time to unleash the goddess within." Avalon smiled, remembering their conversation from last night. Sage, sprawled on the Italian leather sofa with her combat boots propped on the coffee table, a small act of rebellion against Xavier's strict no-shoes policy, had outlined Operation Phoenix with the same precision she used to plate Michelin-starred desserts. "The thing is," Sage had said, swirling her wine thoughtfully, "you've been living in Xavier's world for so long, you've forgotten what your own looks like. Remember college? Before the society galas and charity boards, you were fire, Av, pure, untamed creative energy." The memory of her younger self hit hard. The girl who dyed her hair wild colors and dreamed of revolutionizing the New York pastry scene. Somewhere between "I do" and "I want a divorce," that girl had been carefully packed away, like the vintage band t-shirts now buried at the back of her closet. 3 hours later, Avalon sat in Marco's chair at the Fekai salon, watching her honey-blonde locks fall to the floor. Each snip of the scissors felt like cutting away a strand of Xavier's influence. The rich auburn color they'd chosen was already being mixed, promising to transform her into someone new, or perhaps someone she'd always been beneath the careful highlights and society-approved style. "Darling, you're going to set the city on fire," Marco declared, his skilled hands working their magic. "This color, it's not just a change, it's a statement." As the transformation progressed, Avalon pulled out her laptop and opened the business plan she'd been secretly working on for months. Sweet surrender was successful, yes, but it had always played it safe. Elegant, but expected, just like she'd been. Now, as she watched her reflection evolve, she began to type with renewed purpose. The concept emerged like a phoenix from the ashes of her marriage. Sweet revolution, a fusion of traditional French pastry techniques with bold, unexpected flavors and artistic presentations that would challenge the conventional patisserie scene. No more hiding her creativity behind classic recipes and subdued decorations. It was time to let her imagination run wild. Her phone buzzed again, an email from Carter and Associates regarding the divorce proceedings. But instead of the usual anxiety, Avalon felt a surge of determination. She opened her banking app and transferred her personal savings to a new account, one without Xavier's name attached. The considerable sum, earmarked for the renovation of their Hamptons house, would now fund a different kind of renovation. "Next stop," Sage texted, "your new trainer awaits. Raj is a miracle worker with a side of drill sergeant. Trust me, revenge body incoming." Avalon laughed, catching her reflection in the salon mirror. The woman looking back at her was already different. Her new auburn hair falling in sophisticated waves, her green eyes somehow more striking against the richer color. But it wasn't just the external changes that made her smile. It was the spark in her eyes, the one that had been dormant for so long. That evening, as she walked into the exclusive fitness studio in Tribeca, Avalon felt eyes on her. She recognized some of the women from her social circle, Xavier's circle, their expressions a mix of curiosity and carefully concealed gossip. Let them talk, she thought. Their whispers would only fuel her transformation. Raj, her new trainer, didn't care about society drama or divorce scandals. He cared about form, function, and pushing limits. "Your body is an instrument," he said, correcting her plank position, "not an ornament. We're not here to get skinny. We're here to get strong." The workout was brutal, unlike the gentle yoga and Pilates classes she'd taken to maintain the delicate figure Xavier preferred. By the end, her muscles screamed, and her designer workout gear was soaked with sweat. But the burn felt like redemption, like every rep was forging something new from the ashes of her old life. Back home, she refused to think of it as their home anymore. Avalon surveyed the penthouse with new eyes. The space that had once felt like a perfect showcase now seemed sterile, devoid of personality. She opened her laptop again, this time pulling up real estate listings. The proceeds from her closet sale and ring would be substantial, but she had another asset. Her name on the deed to Sweet Surrender's building, a wedding gift from Xavier that he'd probably forgotten about. As she scrolled through potential commercial properties, her phone lit up with a notification. Celeste had posted another photo, this time of a massive diamond ring on her perfectly manicured finger. The caption read, "When you know, you know. Blessed done new chapter." Avalon's finger hovered over the screen, but instead of the pain she expected, she felt something else: gratitude. Every post, every flaunt of their relationship only crystallized her resolve. She switched apps and opened her calendar, filling it with appointments, meetings with business advisors, consultations with commercial real estate agents, tastings with potential suppliers for Sweet Revolution. The sun had set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Avalon changed into yoga pants and one of her old band t-shirts, reveling in the comfort she'd denied herself for so long. She picked up her worn copy of The Art of French Pastry, not the pristine one on the coffee table for show, but her original, flour-dusted version from culinary school. As she began sketching designs for her new venture, her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Xavier. For the first time, she didn't feel the compulsive need to answer. Instead, she let it ring as she continued drawing, each stroke of her pencil mapping out not just pastries, but her future. "The seeds of change," her grandmother used to say, often look like endings to those who aren't ready to grow. Avalon smiled, adding another layer of detail to her sketch. She was ready. More than ready. It was time to bloom. Chapter 3. Rising from Ashes. 6 months could change everything. Avalon stood in the gleaming kitchen of Sweet Revolution's flagship store in Soho, surrounded by the gentle hum of state-of-the-art pastry equipment and the intoxicating aroma of butter and vanilla. The industrial chic space, with its exposed brick walls and custom copper fixtures, was a far cry from Sweet Surrender's quaint aesthetic. Gone were the shabby chic pastels and dainty tea sets. In their place stood sleek display cases showcasing pastries that looked more like art installations than desserts. "The Times food critic is here," whispered Jasper, her new head pastry chef, his tattooed arms dusted with flour as he carefully assembled their signature Phoenix Rising, a hand-pulled sugar sculpture filled with spiced dark chocolate mousse and gold-leafed passion fruit caramel. "She's already Instagram-storied the facade," Avalon nodded, adjusting her chef's coat, custom designed by an up-and-coming fashion designer who'd approached her after seeing Sweet Revolution featured in Vogue's Women Transforming New York spread. The fitted black jacket with its subtle metallic threading was worlds away from the feminine frilly aprons she'd worn at Sweet Surrender. Like everything else in her life now, it was a statement of reinvention. "Let's give her something to write about," Avalon said, reaching for the torch to finish the sugar work. Her hands were steady, confident, much like the rest of her these days. 6 months of training with Raj had replaced her delicate frame with lean muscle, while intensive business courses at Columbia had sharpened her mind to a razor's edge. The critic wasn't the only one watching. Sweet Revolution had become the talk of New York's culinary scene, with its bold flavors and theatrical presentations drawing influencers and food photographers in droves. The fusion of traditional French techniques with unexpected elements, like their best-selling matcha yuzu eclair with crystallized wasabi, had earned them features in every major food publication. But it wasn't just the pastries that had people talking. Avalon's transformation had become something of a legend in Manhattan's social circles. The society wives who'd once pitied her now asked for her nutritionist's contact information. Young entrepreneurs sought her advice on business expansion. Even Vogue had taken notice, running a piece titled "Sweet Victory: How Avalon Pierce Turned Heartbreak into an Empire." As she put the finishing touches on the Phoenix Rising, Avalon caught her reflection in the polished steel of the kitchen counter. Her auburn hair was swept back in a sleek chignon, her emerald eyes highlighted by subtle but confident makeup. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the one who'd hidden behind honey-blonde waves and comfortable mediocrity. Her phone buzzed, another notification from the Sweet Revolution app that had launched last month. The waiting list for their custom celebration cakes was now 3 months long, and their subscription box service, delivering artisanal pastries to Manhattan's elite, had a wait list twice that. Miss Pierce, her assistant, Aria, appeared at her elbow. "The producers from Rising Star Chef are on line 1. They want to discuss the guest judge position for next season. Television appearances, magazine features, a cookbook deal in the works." Sometimes it felt surreal how quickly everything had changed. But then Avalon would remember the long nights spent perfecting recipes, the early mornings at the gym, the weekends devoted to business classes. Success, she'd learned, wasn't about waiting for opportunity. It was about creating it. The afternoon sun streamed through the custom stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across the bustling kitchen. Avalon moved through her domain with practiced grace, checking preparations for the evening service. Each station was a testament to her vision. The chocolate room where single-origin bars were hand-tempered, the sugar-working station where edible art pieces were born, the patisserie line where classical French techniques met modern innovation. "Your 3 o'clock is here," Aria announced, tablet in hand. "The representatives from Bergdorf's about the holiday window collaboration." Avalon smiled, remembering how she'd once measured success by the brands she could afford to buy. Now, those same luxury retailers were courting her, eager to associate themselves with Sweet Revolution's meteoric rise. Last week, Saks had offered to feature her holiday collection in their flagship store. Tomorrow, she had a meeting about developing a signature pastry line for the 4 seasons. As she headed to her office, a minimalist space with views of the Manhattan skyline, her phone lit up with a text from Sage. "Turn on page 6's Instagram right now. Trust me." Curiosity piqued. Avalon opened the app. There it was, splashed across her screen, photos of Xavier leaving his law firm, looking haggard and decidedly unpolished. The headline read, "Trouble in Paradise. Sources say Pierce Blackwood wedding postponed amid rumors of cold feet." The old Avalon would have felt a twist of satisfaction, maybe even hope. But the woman she'd become simply scrolled past it, more interested in the notifications from her business accounts. Success, she'd discovered, was the sweetest revenge. Her office door opened, and Jasper entered with a prototype of their newest creation, a deconstructed tiramisu that seemed to defy gravity. "The sugar work is still setting, but I think we're onto something revolutionary here," he said, his eyes bright with creative excitement. Avalon studied the dessert, her mind already calculating refinements and presentation angles. This was what she lived for now, pushing boundaries, creating beauty, inspiring wonder. The heartbreak that had catalyzed her transformation had become just another ingredient in her recipe for success. Later that evening, as the last customers lingered over their desserts in the carefully curated ambience of Sweet Revolution's dining room, Avalon took a moment to observe her creation. The space hummed with energy, the clinking of custom-made dessert plates, the murmur of delighted conversation, the constant flash of phones capturing each artistic presentation. Her team moved with practiced precision, each person playing their part in the carefully orchestrated symphony of service. They were artists, innovators, dreamers, handpicked not just for their skills, but for their passion to create something extraordinary. "Miss Pierce," a young woman approached, clutching a copy of the magazine featuring Avalon's story. "Your journey. It's inspired me to finally leave my toxic relationship and start my own business. Would you sign this?" As Avalon took the magazine, she caught sight of her reflection in the metallic page. The woman looking back at her wasn't just successful, she was fulfilled. The broken pieces of her past had been transformed into something far more valuable than what had been shattered. Her phone buzzed again. Another email from Xavier's lawyer about finalizing the divorce settlement. 6 months ago, that notification would have sent her spiraling. Now, it was just administrative noise in the symphony of her new life. "The most powerful transformation," she'd told the Vogue interviewer, "happens when you stop trying to prove something to others and start proving things to yourself." The young woman before her was still waiting, hope bright in her eyes. Avalon picked up a pen, remembering all the moments of doubt, all the late nights questioning her decisions, all the small victories that had led to this moment. "To new beginnings," she wrote, signing her name with a flourish. "Remember, the most beautiful flowers grow from scorched earth." Outside, the New York night sparkled with possibility. Sweet Revolution's illuminated sign cast a warm glow on the steady stream of people still hoping to secure a table. Social media buzzed with photos of their creations, each one tagged with number Sweet Revolution and number Avalon Pierce. 6 months had changed everything, but more importantly, 6 months had revealed everything that had always been there, waiting to rise from the ashes of what was into the brilliance of what could be. Chapter 4. Unexpected Encounters. The Metropolitan Museum's Grand Hall sparkled like a diamond-encrusted dream, its marble floors reflecting the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. New York's elite had gathered for the annual Winter Charity Gala, an event where social currency was traded as freely as stock options on Wall Street. For Avalon, however, this evening marked something different. Sweet Revolution's debut as the gala's exclusive dessert curator, a position previously held by legendary French patisseries. She stood near the custom-designed dessert installation, a masterpiece of contemporary pastry arts that had already drawn gasps from the arriving guests. Three-tiered stands of hand-painted chocolate sculptures rose like modern architecture, while gravity-defying sugarwork captured and refracted light like frozen waterfalls. Each piece told a story of transformation, butterflies emerging from crystalline cocoons, phoenixes taking flight in spun sugar and gold leaf. The Washington Post food critic just posted about your constellation macarons, Aria whispered, tablet in hand. They're calling it an ethereal marriage of art and patisserie. The post's already gone viral. Avalon smiled, adjusting the burgundy Zuhair Murad gown she'd chosen for the evening. The dress, with its architectural details and daring silhouette, was worlds away from the safe, society-approved choices that had once filled her closet. Like everything else in her new life, it was a statement of intent rather than a plea for approval. "Ms. Pierce," a silky voice called. Architectural Digest would love a quote about the installation's design inspiration. She turned to address the journalist, her movement causing the dress's carefully draped fabric to catch the light. That's when she saw him. Xavier Pierce stood frozen at the entrance to the grand hall, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips. Even from across the room, Avalon could see the shock register on his face as his eyes traveled over her transformed appearance. Gone was the demure blonde who'd once stood in his shadow at these events. In her place stood a woman who commanded attention without seeking it. Celeste hung decoratively on his arm, her cream-colored Dior gown a stark contrast to Avalon's bold choice. The massive engagement ring that had featured in countless social media posts caught the light, but even its sparkle seemed diminished somehow, like costume jewelry next to a real gem. "Your quote about inspiration," the journalist prompted, following Avalon's gaze. She turned back smoothly, years of society training allowing her to maintain perfect composure. "The installation explores the concept of metamorphosis," she replied, her voice carrying just far enough. "How pressure and heat transform simple ingredients into something extraordinary, rather like life itself." The journalist scribbled eagerly, but Avalon could feel Xavier's eyes still fixed on her. She remembered countless galas where she'd stood beside him, carefully monitoring her words and behavior to match his expectations. Now she moved through the space with the confidence of someone who'd not only found her voice, but had learned to use it as an instrument of power. "Avalon?" His voice carried across the space between them, heavy with disbelief and something else, regret, desire. She turned, offering him the same polite smile she gave to casual acquaintances. "Mr. Pierce," she acknowledged, her tone carrying the sweetness of her finest confections, but none of the warmth. "I believe you've tried our new winter collection. The dark chocolate passion fruit entremet has been particularly popular among the investment banking crowd." She watched him flinch at her professional tone, at the deliberate use of his formal title. Beside him, Celeste's perfectly made-up face tightened almost imperceptibly. "You look—" Xavier started, then faltered, seemingly at a loss for words. A first for the man who brokered billion-dollar deals over breakfast. "Successful," Avalon supplied helpfully, noting how Celeste's grip on his arm had tightened. "It's amazing what the right ingredients can produce, given time to develop properly." The double meaning hung in the air between them, like spun sugar, delicate but sharp-edged. Around them, the city's elite pretended not to watch, while hanging on every word. "I've been following Sweet Revolution's success," Xavier managed finally. "The Bergdorf's holiday collaboration was impressive." "Just the beginning, actually," Avalon replied, gesturing to a passing server who carried a tray of her signature Phoenix Rising desserts. "We're opening locations in Paris and Tokyo next spring, but you'll know all about expansion plans, won't you? I heard Pearson Hamilton is trying to break into the Asian market, though I imagine that's been challenging since the Singapore merger fell through." She saw the surprise flash across his face. She'd clearly done her homework. What he didn't know was that several of his former clients now ordered custom celebration cakes from Sweet Revolution, and boardroom gossip flowed as freely as the champagne at their private tastings. "You've changed," he said quietly, his eyes taking in every detail of her transformation. "No," Avalon corrected him, her voice gentle but firm. "I've simply stopped pretending to be less than I am." A prominent food critic approached, eager to discuss the innovative techniques behind the installation. Avalon turned away from Xavier with practiced ease, as if he were any other guest seeking her attention. "If you'll excuse me," she said, "duty calls. Do try the constellation macarons. They're designed to evoke memories of first kisses and forgotten promises. Rather fitting for the evening, don't you think?" She glided away, feeling their eyes on her back, but no longer caring about their judgment. The confident click of her Louboutins against marble was a rhythm she'd written herself, no longer dancing to someone else's tune. Later, as she supervised the plating of the gala's signature dessert course, Avalon caught glimpses of Xavier throughout the evening. He seemed unable to keep his eyes off her, even as Celeste worked overtime to maintain their image as Manhattan's most enviable couple. "Your ex-husband can't stop staring," Jasper noted as he put the finishing touches on a plate. "Think he's regretting his choices?" Avalon smiled, adjusting a sugar sculpture with precise movements. "His regret is no longer my concern," she replied, "though I do hope he enjoys the dessert. I designed it specially for tonight. It's called The Price of Paradise. Beautiful to look at, but bittersweet when you finally taste it." The evening wore on, a dance of social obligations and professional triumphs. Avalon moved through it all with grace, accepting compliments and fielding business proposals. She didn't need to look to know when Xavier and Celeste left. She felt the shift in the room's energy, like a cloud passing from in front of the sun. As the last guest departed and her team began the meticulous process of dismantling the installation, Avalon's phone buzzed with a text from Sage. "You broke the internet, honey. Page 6 already has photos up. You look like a goddess of revenge, and Xavier looks like he's seen a ghost. Welcome to the sweet life of success." Avalon slipped her phone back into her clutch, a small smile playing at her lips. Tomorrow, social media would be ablaze with discussions of the encounter, analyzing every detail of their interaction. But for now, she had more important things to focus on, like the final preparations for Sweet Revolution's Paris location and the upcoming feature in Food and Wine. Standing in the now quiet grand hall, Avalon took a moment to appreciate her reflection in the massive mirrors. The woman who looked back at her wasn't defined by her relationship to Xavier Pierce or anyone else. She was self-made, self-defined, and entirely self-possessed. "Well," she murmured to her reflection, "that was certainly sweet." Outside, the New York night sparkled with possibilities, and somewhere in the city, a man who had once thought he knew her was discovering that some things, once lost, become more valuable than you ever imagined they could be. Chapter 5. The Awakening. The morning after the Metropolitan Gala, Manhattan's social media exploded with images of what Page 6 had dubbed the Sweet Revenge. Avalon scrolled through her phone during her 6 a.m. workout with Raj, her muscles burning as she held a perfect plank position. Every major fashion and society account had picked up the story, dissecting every detail of her encounter with Xavier. "Your form is getting sloppy," Raj commented, tapping her shoulder to adjust her position. "Whatever's on that phone can wait. Success is built in these moments when nobody's watching." But people were watching, more than ever. The top trending photo showed her in profile, the burgundy Zuhair Murad gown, catching the light as she turned away from Xavier, her auburn hair gleaming like liquid copper under the chandeliers. The caption read, "From society wife to empire builder, Avalon Pierce shows X what he's missing at Met Gala." Another publication had done a side-by-side comparison of her before and after, an old photo from a charity event 2 years ago next to last night's triumph. The transformation was striking, not just in her appearance, but in the energy she projected. The old Avalon seemed to curl inward, seeking approval. The new one commanded space, without apology. "Enough phone time," Raj insisted, setting up for their next circuit. "Channel that energy into your workout. Success is the best revenge, but abs help too." 2 hours later, freshly showered and dressed in a sleek Tom Ford pantsuit, Avalon strode into Sweet Revolution's Soho flagship store. The morning buzz was in full swing, with a line stretching around the block for their breakfast pastries. Among the usual fashion editors and social media influencers, she spotted several faces from last night's gala, including 2 women she recognized from Xavier's law firm. "Ms. Pierce," Aria approached with her tablet. "Good Morning America wants to do a feature on female entrepreneurs rising from adversity. They specifically mentioned your story. Also, Vogue wants to do a follow-up piece after last night, and the Met Gala committee has already reached out about making Sweet Revolution their permanent dessert partner." Avalon nodded, making her way through the bustling kitchen where Jasper and his team were crafting their signature creations. The air was thick with the scent of butter, vanilla, and possibility. "Schedule the GMA segment for next week. For Vogue, let's wait. We'll have more to announce soon about the international expansion." She had just settled into her office when her phone lit up with a name she hadn't expected. Xavier's mother, Victoria Pierce. "Darling," Victoria's cultured voice filled the line. "I saw the photos. You were magnificent." Avalon's relationship with her former mother-in-law had always been complex. Victoria Pierce was old money, a keeper of social traditions who had initially viewed Avalon as beneath her son's station. But somewhere between cooking lessons and quiet Sunday teas, they'd formed a bond that had survived even Xavier's betrayal. "The installation was well received," Avalon replied diplomatically. "Oh, please," Victoria chuckled. "We both know I'm not calling about the desserts, though they look divine. I'm calling because my son is an idiot, and seeing him realize that in real time was the highlight of my social season." Despite herself, Avalon smiled. Victoria had never been one to mince words. "He came by the house this morning," Victoria continued. "Looking quite haunted, I might add. It seems seeing you last night sparked quite the awakening." Avalon's hand stilled over the contract she'd been reviewing, a licensing deal for Sweet Revolution's signature chocolate line. "Victoria, don't worry, darling. I'm not playing matchmaker. I just thought you should know that Celeste threw quite the tantrum at the Pierce family brunch this morning. Something about Xavier being distracted and distant since last night. She left in tears, that gorgeous Cartier ring conspicuously absent from her finger." Before Avalon could respond, Aria knocked on her office door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." On Aria's tablet was a fresh page 6 update. Photos showed Celeste leaving the Pierce mansion that morning, mascara streaking her face, no engagement ring in sight. The headline read, "Trouble in Paradise. Pierce Blackwood engagement off following explosive Met Gala drama." "I'll call you back, Victoria," Avalon said, ending the call just as her phone began buzzing with notifications. Every society gossip account was picking up the story, speculating about the role last night's encounter had played in the apparent breakup. As if on cue, a text from Xavier appeared. "Can we talk?" "Please." Avalon stared at the message, remembering all the times she'd begged him for conversations he'd been too busy to have. Now, roles reversed, she felt no satisfaction in his desperation, only a calm certainty about her worth. "Ms. Pierce?" Jasper appeared at her door. "The team from Paris is here for the final menu tasting, and that food critic from Le Monde is waiting in the private dining room." Life went on. Her empire continued to grow. Xavier's drama was no longer the center of her universe, barely even a footnote in her story now. She typed a quick response. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full. My assistant will be happy to help if you'd like to order any of our signature collections." Professional, polite, completely unmoved by his crisis. The day unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings, tastings, and business decisions. Avalon moved through it with practiced grace, her mind focused on expansion plans and innovation rather than social drama. But as evening fell and the last meetings concluded, she found herself walking to the rooftop garden she'd installed above the flagship store. The space was her private retreat, filled with herb gardens that supplied the kitchen below. As she stood at the edge, looking out over the glittering city, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Xavier. "I know I don't deserve your time, but seeing you last night, you've become extraordinary, Avalon. The woman you are now, it's who you always were, wasn't it? I was just too blind to see it." The message sat there, glowing on her screen like a confession. Below, the streets of Soho pulsed with energy, and somewhere in the distance, a man was finally awakening to the magnitude of what he'd lost. But up here, in her garden above the city, Avalon felt only peace. She typed one final message. "The woman I am now existed all along. She just needed to stop dimming her light for someone else's comfort. I wish you clarity on your journey of self-discovery, Xavier. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an empire to run." With that, she muted his number and turned back to the herb garden. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to push boundaries and break molds. The days of defining herself through Xavier's lens were over. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light across her rooftop sanctuary, Avalon smiled. The awakening, she realized, had never been about Xavier at all. It had been about her all along, about becoming the woman she'd always been beneath the careful constraints of society's expectations. "Ms. Pierce," Arya's voice came through the rooftop intercom. "The team from Tokyo is on the line for the final contract review." Avalon took one last look at the city skyline, then turned toward her future. Let Xavier have his awakening. She had a revolution to lead. Down in the kitchen, the evening service was in full swing. Through the glass walls of her office, she could see her team crafting edible works of art, each piece a testament to transformation. On her desk, international contracts awaited her signature, and her calendar was filled with appearances and expansion plans. The society pages could speculate all they wanted about Xavier's awakening. Avalon had her own story to write. One ingredient, one creation, one triumph at a time. And this story, it was just beginning. Chapter 6. Ripples of the Past. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sweet Revolution's executive office as Avalon reviewed the final renderings for their Paris location. The space, a historic building in the Marais district, would blend classic French architecture with modern elegance, much like her reinvented pastries. But her attention kept drifting to the massive bouquet dominating her desk, its handwritten card still unopened. It was the third delivery this week. The first had been classic roses, beautiful but predictable, just like Xavier's taste. The second had been exotic orchids, probably chosen by his assistant after the roses failed to elicit a response. This latest arrangement was different, wild and artistic, featuring her favorite rare blooms. Someone had done their research. "Another one just arrived downstairs," Arya announced, entering with her ever-present tablet. "This time it's a vintage bottle of Chateau d'Yquem 1945, the same wine you had on your first date. Should I add it to the collection?" Avalon glanced through the glass walls of her office at the growing display of Xavier's attempts at reconciliation. Each gift more thoughtful than the last, each one carefully chosen to evoke memories of their shared past. A first edition of her favorite cookbook, a hand-painted tea set from that little shop in Kyoto they discovered on their honeymoon, a delicate music box that played Debussy's Clair de Lune, the song they danced to at their wedding. Donate the wine to the charity auction next week, Avalon decided, turning back to the Paris blueprints. And have the flowers sent to the children's hospital. They shouldn't go to waste. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Xavier. Avalon, I know you're reading these, even if you don't respond. You always had a better poker face than me at charity galas, but I learned to read the subtle shifts in your expression long ago. Though clearly, I didn't learn enough. Seeing you at the Met Gala was like waking up from a long sleep. The woman you've become, confident, powerful, absolutely radiant. She was always there, wasn't she? I just couldn't see her through my own ambitions and expectations. Celeste and I are over. Not because of that night, though it was the catalyst. We're over because I finally realized I've been chasing a reflection while letting go of something real. She fit the image I thought I wanted, but you've shattered every image and created something far more extraordinary. Please, just coffee. One conversation. Let me apologize properly for being the fool who couldn't see the masterpiece in front of him. X. Avalon archived the email alongside dozens of others, each one more eloquent than the last. Xavier had always been skilled with words. It was part of what made him such a successful lawyer. But she'd learned the hard way that words without action were just pretty lies, dressed in expensive fonts. Ms. Pierce? Jasper appeared at her door, excitement evident in his voice. The test kitchen has finally perfected that impossible dessert you challenged us to create. We're calling it Past Imperfect. Would you like to see? She followed him to the development kitchen, where her team had been working for weeks on her latest vision. A dessert that appeared simple at first glance, but revealed hidden complexities with each layer. As she watched the presentation, her phone buzzed again. A text from Sage. Your ex is currently sitting in my restaurant, drowning his sorrows in a bottle of ridiculously expensive wine and asking me what your favorite flowers are these days. Should I tell him about your new preference for Japanese ranunculus, or let him keep sending roses like basic boy that he is? Avalon smiled, remembering how Xavier had once dismissed her interest in exotic flowers as impractical. Now, here he was, desperately trying to prove he'd paid attention to details he'd previously ignored. Ms. Pierce? Arya interrupted her thoughts. The Good Morning America segment just aired on the East Coast. Social media is exploding. You're trending nationwide. And Mr. Pierce appears to have shared the segment on all his social media platforms with some rather emotional captions. Curious despite herself, Avalon pulled up Xavier's Instagram. There it was, her GMA interview shared with a single line. Some people shine so bright they leave you blind to your own mistakes. Watch this. Just watch. The post had already gone viral, with society pages speculating about the public display of regret from Manhattan's usually stoic power lawyer. Celeste had responded with a series of cryptic quotes about narcissistic exes and toxic patterns, each post more bitter than the last. Your 3 o'clock is here, Arya announced. The team from Architectural Digest for the Paris location feature. Avalon nodded, straightening her Valentino blazer. Have the new dessert brought to the conference room, and Arya, if any more deliveries arrive from Mr. Pierce, please direct them straight to charity. It's time to close that chapter completely. But as she walked to her meeting, another text lit up her phone, this time from Victoria Pierce. Darling, I know you've moved on, and rightfully so, but I thought you should know. Xavier just resigned from Pierce and Hamilton. He told the board he needs to build himself from the ground up. I haven't seen him this lost since his father died. Or this clear-headed, honestly. Avalon paused, letting that information settle. Xavier walking away from the family firm was like a fish deciding to try life on land, completely against his nature. The man who'd once cancelled their anniversary dinner for a client meeting was now walking away from his entire career trajectory. Her phone buzzed again. Xavier. I know you're not reading these. Or maybe you are, and I've lost the right to know either way. But I need you to know something. I'm selling my shares in the firm, taking some time to figure out who I am without all the expectations and pressures I've hidden behind. You taught me that sometimes you have to break everything down to build something real. I'm not telling you this to win you back. You've built something magnificent without me, and I have no right to try to insert myself into that story. I just thought you should know that your transformation inspired one of your own. The man you met in college, the one who talked about changing the world before he let the world change him instead. He's still in here somewhere. I'd like to find him again, with or without your forgiveness. X. The message sat there, its sincerity an unexpected weight in her otherwise perfectly controlled day. She thought of the Xavier she'd first fallen in love with, the idealistic law student who wanted to fight for environmental causes before family pressure and social expectations had redirected him toward corporate law. Ms. Pierce. Aria's gentle reminder brought her back to the present. The Architectural Digest team is waiting. Avalon tucked her phone away, pushing thoughts of Xavier's transformation to the back of her mind. She had her own empire to run, her own dreams to build. His journey of self-discovery was no longer her responsibility. Still, as she walked into the conference room to discuss her expanding international brand, a small part of her remembered something her grandmother used to say: sometimes people have to lose their way completely before they can find their true path. The afternoon light caught the edge of her custom ring. Not a diamond this time, but a piece she'd designed herself, featuring a phoenix rising from ashes, crafted in rose gold and black diamonds. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things emerge from complete destruction. She turned her attention to the meeting, to her future, to the empire she was building. Xavier's awakening was his own journey now. She had a revolution to lead, and it waited for no one, not even reformed prodigal sons seeking redemption. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. The late morning sun transformed Sweet Revolution's flagship store into a cathedral of light and possibility. Avalon stood in the center of the photography set, where Vogue's renowned photographer captured shots for their Women Redefining Success issue. The feature would coincide with the opening of her Paris location, a carefully orchestrated media blitz that had the fashion and culinary worlds buzzing with anticipation. "Beautiful," the photographer murmured, adjusting his lens as Avalon posed beside her latest creation, a gravity-defying chocolate sculpture that seemed to defy physics. "Now, if you could just—" Avalon. The voice cut through the controlled chaos of the photo shoot like a knife through butter. Xavier stood in the doorway, looking nothing like the polished corporate lawyer she remembered. Gone was the perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit and carefully maintained facade. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, his usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, addressing the room but looking only at her. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking for." The photographer lowered his camera, clearly sensing the electric tension in the air. Aria stepped forward, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "Mr. Pierce, I'm afraid Ms. Pierce's schedule is completely full today. If you'd like to make an appointment—" "It's all right, Aria," Avalon interrupted, her voice steady despite the sudden acceleration of her pulse. "Let's take 5, everyone." The staff dispersed with practiced efficiency, though she noticed several lingering within earshot, hungry for the drama that had kept gossip columns fed for weeks. Even Jasper, usually absorbed in his culinary creations, found a reason to reorganize the display case nearest to them. "You look incredible," Xavier said softly, taking a step closer. "Then again, you always did. I just didn't say it enough." Avalon smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her Chanel dress, white with architectural details that made it more sculpture than garment. "What are you doing here, Xavier?" "I've sold my shares in the firm," he replied, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture of agitation. "Step down from the board. Everyone thinks I'm having a midlife crisis." "And are you?" "No." His eyes met hers with an intensity that reminded her of their college days. "I'm having an awakening. Seeing you at the Met Gala, it wasn't just about how stunning you looked. It was about seeing you completely in your element, absolutely owning your power. You've built something extraordinary here, Avalon. Something real." She glanced around her domain, the gleaming kitchen where innovation happened daily, the elegant space where art and culinary science merged, the wall of accolades that grew weekly. "I built this because you showed me I was capable of it, just not in the way you intended." "I know." He took another step closer, close enough now that she could smell his cologne, different from the one he'd worn during their marriage, she noted absently. "I broke us because I was too focused on building the life I thought I should want. The house in the Hamptons, the social connections, the perfect society wife who'd play her role without overshadowing me." "And Celeste?" Avalon's voice carried just a hint of steel. "Was she not perfect enough either?" "Celeste was a mirror of my own ambition," Xavier admitted. "But mirrors don't warm your soul. They just show you what you want to see until you're forced to look deeper." A small crowd had gathered outside the store's windows, phones raised to capture what Page 6 would undoubtedly call the confrontation of the season. Inside, the air felt heavy with unspoken words and shifting possibilities. "You left me," Avalon said quietly, each word precise as a pastry knife. "You threw away 7 years of marriage because I didn't fit your image of success. Do you know what that does to someone? How it makes them question every moment, every memory." "I was wrong." Xavier's voice cracked slightly. "So completely, absolutely wrong. The woman you've become, this fierce, brilliant force of nature, she was always there. I just couldn't see her because I was too busy trying to mold you into someone else." "The woman I've become," Avalon echoed, taking a step back, "exists because you forced me to choose between breaking down and breaking free. I chose freedom. I chose myself. And you chose brilliantly." He gestured to the empire around them. "You've transformed not just yourself, but an entire industry. Every time I see your name in the press, every time I hear about another achievement, I'm struck by the magnitude of what I lost." "What you threw away," she corrected him. "There's a difference." The morning light caught the edges of her latest creation, a chocolate and sugar sculpture depicting a phoenix rising from crystalline flames. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "I'm starting over," Xavier announced, his voice carrying the same conviction she remembered from their law school days. "I've accepted a position with an environmental law firm in Brooklyn, small office, huge pay cut, but they're doing important work. The kind of work I used to dream about before I let my father's expectations reshape my dreams." Avalon studied him, noting the changes that went deeper than his casual attire. There was a humility in his stance that she'd never seen before, a vulnerability that the old Xavier would have considered weakness. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you taught me that real transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about having the courage to become who you always were beneath the facades." He ran a hand through his hair again. "I'm not asking for another chance, Avalon. I haven't earned that right. I just needed you to know that your revolution inspired one of your own." The silence between them hummed with possibility and pain, with endings and new beginnings. Through the windows, Avalon could see the paparazzi gathering, hungry for their next viral moment. But for once, she wasn't thinking about optics or headlines. My time is valuable now, Xavier, she said finally. Something you taught me when you decided I wasn't worth yours. He flinched at her words, but nodded. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. I just hope someday you'll believe that the man standing here now is closer to the one you met in law school than the one who let you go. As if on cue, Arya appeared at Avalon's side. I'm sorry, Ms. Pierce, but the team from Paris is waiting on the video call, and the Michelin inspector will be here in 30 minutes. Avalon nodded, ready to step back into her role as empire builder and culinary revolutionary. But before she could turn away, Xavier spoke again. Do you remember what you said to me on our first date? About how the best pastries are the ones that surprise you with each layer. I'm finally understanding what you meant. Some things have to be deconstructed completely before they can become something authentic. She met his gaze one last time, seeing in it the echoes of the idealistic law student she'd fallen in love with, now tempered by hard-earned wisdom. Goodbye, Xavier. I hope you find what you're looking for. As she walked away, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor, Avalon felt something shift inside her, not an ending or a beginning, but a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the most powerful revolutions are the ones that transform both the catalyst and the transformed. The Vogue photographer was ready to resume, her latest creation waiting to be immortalized. Outside, the crowd of onlookers pressed closer, phones still raised. But Avalon's mind was already moving forward, to Paris openings and Tokyo expansions, to new recipes and innovations yet to be created. Let the gossip columns speculate about Xavier's transformation. She had her own story to write, and it was far from finished. Chapter 8. Breaking Points. The headlines spread across social media like wildfire. Sweet revolution, power couples confrontation goes viral. The video of Xavier's appearance at Sweet Revolution had somehow leaked, capturing their intense exchange from multiple angles. Every gossip site and society blog dissected their interaction, frame by frame, analyzing everything from Avalon's body language to Xavier's transformed appearance. Avalon stood in her private rooftop garden above Sweet Revolution's flagship store, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold and rose. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the video went viral. Calls from media outlets, messages from friends, and a particularly interesting email from Netflix about rights to her story. Your ex-husband's quite the trending topic, Sage commented, joining her with 2 glasses of wine. They'd planned this rooftop dinner weeks ago, before today's drama had unfolded. Though I must say, watching New York's most ruthless corporate lawyer turn into a humble environmental warrior is better than any reality TV show. Avalon accepted the glass, breathing in the fragrant herbs from her garden. The space had become her sanctuary, a place where she could think clearly above the chaos of her ever-expanding empire. Have you seen the latest? She pulled up the article on her phone, a detailed exposé about Xavier's recent activities. He'd not only joined a small environmental law firm in Brooklyn, but was also doing pro bono work for local community gardens. The photo showed him in jeans and a t-shirt, helping build raised beds in a community project, looking more alive than she'd seen him in years. Well, well, Sage mused, scanning the article. Seems like someone's having their own revolution, though I have to say the comments on this are interesting. The public reaction to Xavier's transformation had been polarizing. Some praised his apparent redemption arc, while others accused him of orchestrating an elaborate PR stunt to win Avalon back. Celeste had fueled the latter theory with a scathing Instagram post about manipulative men who play humble when they can't handle successful women. Ms. Pierce, Arya's voice came through the intercom. I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, but there's something you need to see. Moments later, Arya joined them on the rooftop, tablet in hand. Someone leaked emails from your divorce proceedings, the ones where Mr. Pierce admitted to his affair with Miss Blackwood. They're going viral and, well, there's more. The screen showed a series of leaked text messages between Xavier and Celeste from the early days of their affair, interspersed with time-stamped photos of them at various locations, all while he was still married to Avalon. The story had broken on a major gossip site under the headline, "The Real Reason: Explosive Revelations About Pierce Blackwood Affair." "Celeste," Avalon said quietly, recognizing the calculated timing of the leak. "She's trying to control the narrative." As if on cue, her phone lit up with a text from Victoria Pierce. "Darling, have you seen what that viper's done?" Xavier's beside himself. "He's at the house now and, well, I've never seen him like this." Another notification popped up. Xavier's first public statement since their confrontation, posted on his newly active Twitter account. "I've seen the leaked messages. Yes, I betrayed someone extraordinary for something superficial. Yes, I let ambition and social expectations corrupt my judgment. I'm not asking for forgiveness or understanding, but I want to be clear. My current actions aren't a PR stunt. They're an attempt to become the man I should have been all along." The post was going viral, with social media divided between those supporting his apparent redemption and those convinced it was all an elaborate performance. Celeste had already responded with a series of cryptic Instagram stories, each one designed to paint herself as the victim of Xavier's pattern of manipulation. "Ms. Pierce," Jasper appeared at the rooftop door. "Page 6 is calling about a rumor that Mr. Pierce has been seen dining at Sweet Revolution's competitor, Bitter and Sweet. They're spinning it as him trying to sabotage your business." Avalon almost laughed at the absurdity. "Xavier doesn't even like dessert. He never has. He used to joke that it was perfect we met because he could always give me his portion." The memory hit her unexpectedly. Countless dinner parties where he discreetly passed her his untouched dessert, their private signal unchanged through years of marriage. It was these small, intimate details that the public drama couldn't capture, the real history that lay beneath the headlines. "There's more," Arya added reluctantly. "Miss Blackwood has apparently signed a deal for a tell-all book. The working title is Sweet Deception: Behind the Perfect Marriage." Sage snorted into her wine. Perfect marriage. She does realize she was the mistress, right? But Avalon had stopped listening, her attention caught by something else, a small figure on the street below, barely visible in the growing darkness. Xavier stood there, looking up at the rooftop garden, his posture conveying a defeat she'd never seen in him before. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment the chaos of leaked messages and public drama fell away. She could see the weight of his mistakes in the slope of his shoulders, the genuine remorse in his stance. He made no gesture, no attempt to call up to her. He simply stood there, bearing witness to the empire he'd inadvertently helped her build. "Should I call security?" Arya asked, already reaching for her phone. "No," Avalon said quietly. "Let him stand there. Sometimes we need to fully face what we've lost before we can truly begin again." The moment was interrupted by another wave of notifications. Celeste had uploaded a video, tears streaming perfectly down her face, claiming that Xavier had manipulated her just as he was now trying to manipulate public opinion. The performance was masterful, designed to generate maximum sympathy and outrage. "You know," Sage observed, watching Xavier's solitary figure below, "for a man who used to orchestrate billion-dollar deals, he's doing a remarkably poor job of managing this PR crisis, almost like he's not trying to manage it at all." Avalon nodded, understanding dawning. The old Xavier would have hired the best crisis management team, controlled the narrative with surgical precision. This Xavier was letting the mess unfold, accepting the consequences of his actions without trying to spin them. Her phone buzzed again, Another email from Netflix, this time offering an even larger sum for her story rights. The subject line read, "The Sweet Revolution from Betrayal to Empire." "What are you thinking?" Sage asked, noting her friend's contemplative expression. Avalon turned from the railing, leaving Xavier to his silent vigil below. "I'm thinking it's time to focus on Paris. Let the past sort itself out while we build the future." But as she headed inside to her office, where plans for international expansion awaited her attention, she couldn't help but glance back once more. Xavier had finally turned to leave, his figure disappearing into the New York night. Something about his solitary departure touched a part of her she'd thought long buried, not the part that had loved him, but the part that understood how hard it was to face one's own failures without flinching. "Ms. Pierce," Arya followed her inside. "About tomorrow's schedule." Life moved forward, empire building continued, and somewhere in the city, a man learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest act of love is accepting that you've lost the right to fight for it. Chapter 9. The Price of Growth. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the Manhattan skyline when Celeste Blackwood strode into Sweet Revolution's flagship store, her Louboutins clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to disaster. The staff froze, their morning preparations halting as the woman who'd played such a pivotal role in their boss's story made her dramatic entrance. Avalon was in the test kitchen, perfecting a new creation for the Paris opening, when Arya burst in, slightly breathless. "Ms. Pierce, we have a situation." Looking up from her work, Avalon caught sight of Celeste through the glass walls, a vision in Chanel, her perfect blonde waves and camera-ready makeup suggesting this visit was anything but impromptu. Several phones were already raised, recording what promised to be social media's next viral moment. "How interesting," Avalon said calmly, removing her apron. "I don't recall seeing her name in our reservation system." She took a moment to smooth her Stella McCartney pantsuit, burgundy, like the wine she'd spilled the night Xavier confessed his affair. Some choices were deliciously deliberate. "You've got some nerve," Celeste spat, as Avalon emerged from the kitchen, her voice pitched perfectly to carry to the growing crowd of onlookers outside. "Using your PR machine to paint me as the villain while you play the triumphant phoenix rising from the ashes. Well, I've got news for you, honey. This story isn't over." Avalon regarded her with the same critical eye she used to evaluate imperfect pastries. "I wasn't aware my business success had anything to do with you, Miss Blackwood, though I must thank you. Your actions did provide rather excellent motivation for my transformation." "Don't act so superior," Celeste hissed, taking a step closer. "You think I don't know what you're doing? The leaked emails, the perfectly timed paparazzi shots of Xavier looking all reformed and humble. You're trying to destroy what I built, just like you're trying to manipulate him back into your life." A small crowd had gathered inside the store now, regular customers, tourists, and what appeared to be several social media influencers, all filming eagerly. Through the windows, Avalon could see news vans pulling up. Of course, Celeste had probably tipped them off herself. "I haven't leaked anything, Miss Blackwood," Avalon replied, her voice carrying the same sweetness as her signature caramel. "Though I find it interesting that you assume someone would need to manipulate the truth to make you look bad. Sometimes reality does that all on its own." "Reality?" Celeste laughed, but there was a brittle edge to it. "Let's talk about reality. Let's talk about how you're using this whole wronged woman rises from ashes narrative to build your brand. Let's talk about how you've turned my relationship with Xavier into your marketing strategy." "Your relationship?" Avalon's eyebrow arched perfectly, a gesture that would undoubtedly be gift within hours. You mean your affair with my husband? The one you so carefully documented on social media, dating back to when I was still planning our anniversary celebration? The crowd murmured. Someone gasped. Phones recorded everything. That's not... You're twisting things, Celeste stammered, her perfect composure cracking slightly. Xavier and I had a connection. We understood each other in ways you never could. You were holding him back with your simple dreams and your little bakery. Avalon gestured to the gleaming empire around them, the state-of-the-art kitchens, the international press clippings, the wall of awards. Yes, I can see how such simple dreams would be beneath you both. You think you've won? Celeste's voice rose, abandoning all pretense of sophistication. My book will expose everything. How you manipulated your way into the Pierce family. How you played the victim to build your business. I'll show the world who you really are. Ms. Pierce. Jasper appeared at Avalon's elbow. The team from Vogue is here early for the Paris preview shoot. Should I reschedule? No need. Avalon smiled, never taking her eyes off Celeste. I believe Ms. Blackwood was just leaving. Though I must say, if you're planning to write about who I really am, you might want to start with who I've become. A woman who doesn't need to tear others down to rise, who builds empires instead of stealing relationships, who transforms pain into profit instead of peddling it to publishers. The crowd erupted in scattered applause. Someone called out, "Queen!" Another voice added, "Sweet revenge indeed." Celeste's face contorted with rage. "You sanctimonious I wouldn't finish that word," Avalon interrupted smoothly. "The acoustics in here are excellent, and I believe TMZ is live streaming through that window." Sure enough, camera crews had assembled outside, capturing every moment of the confrontation. Celeste's planned ambush had backfired spectacularly. "Security will show you out," Avalon continued, already turning away. "Do try our new collection before you leave. The truth unveiled is particularly revealing. Each layer tells a different story." As security approached, Celeste made one last, desperate play. "He never loved you," she shouted. "You were just convenient, safe, boring. I was exciting, ambitious." "You were a mirror," Avalon cut in, her voice gentle but carrying. "You showed him exactly what he wanted to see. I showed him who he could be. That's why he's changing now, not for me, but because he's finally seeing himself clearly." The security team had reached Celeste, but before they could escort her out, Victoria Pierce swept into the store like an avenging angel in Dior. "Darling," Victoria called out to Avalon, pointedly ignoring Celeste, "I hope I'm not late for our breakfast meeting about the charity gala. Though I see you're dealing with some unnecessary debris from the past." Celeste blanched. Victoria Pierce's social influence could make or break careers in Manhattan's elite circles. "Victoria, Ms. Pierce, to you," Victoria corrected icily. "I believe you've lost the right to any familiarity with my family. Now, if you'll excuse us, my daughter-in-law and I have important matters to discuss." "Ex-daughter-in-law?" Celeste corrected automatically, though her voice had lost its edge. "Oh, darling." Victoria smiled like a shark scenting blood. "The divorce may have dissolved the legal ties, but Avalon has proven herself more worthy of the Pierce name than you could ever hope to be. Your 15 minutes are up. Do try not to let the door hit you on your way back to obscurity." The security team finally managed to escort Celeste out, her perfect composure completely shattered. Through the windows, they could see her practically running from the waiting cameras, her planned media ambush thoroughly derailed. "Well," Victoria said briskly, turning to Avalon, "that was invigorating. Now shall we discuss the real reason I'm here? The Foundation Board is very interested in your proposal for the culinary education program for underprivileged youth." Avalon nodded, leading Victoria toward her office. But before they could reach it, Arya appeared with her tablet. "Ms. Pierce, you might want to see this." The screen showed Xavier's latest tweet, posted just moments ago. Some people show their true colors through actions, others through accusations. I made my mistakes and own them, but I won't stand by while others try to rewrite history to hide their own culpability. The truth needs no manipulation. It simply is. Below his tweet was a link to a Dropbox folder containing what appeared to be years of correspondence between him and Celeste. Emails, texts, photos, the smoking gun that would completely discredit her upcoming book. "Well, well," Victoria mused, reading over Avalon's shoulder. "It seems my son has finally learned the value of radical honesty, though his timing remains impeccable." Another notification popped up. Celeste's publisher had just released a statement announcing the cancellation of her book deal. Apparently they had concerns about the authenticity of certain claims. "Ms. Pierce," Jasper called from the kitchen, "the Vogue team is ready when you are. They're particularly excited about photographing the new Paris collection." Avalon handed the tablet back to Arya. "The past can wait. We have a future to build." As she walked away, her phone buzzed with a text from Xavier. "I didn't do this for you. I did it because it's time everyone's truth was revealed, including my own. Good luck with Paris." Outside, the morning sun had finally crested the Manhattan skyline, washing sweet revolution in golden light. Inside, Avalon moved through her domain with the confidence of a woman who had learned that the sweetest revenge wasn't about destroying others. It was about building yourself into something so magnificent that their attempts to dim your light only made you shine brighter. The Vogue team was setting up their equipment, preparing to capture the next chapter of her story. But this chapter wasn't about Xavier, or Celeste, or even revenge. It was about the price of growth. How some people rise by climbing over others, while others rise by building elevators for those who would follow. "Ready for your close-up, Ms. Pierce?" the photographer asked. Avalon smiled, thinking of how far she'd come from that heartbroken woman staring at divorce papers in a sunlit kitchen. "Ready," she replied. "I've never been more ready." Chapter 10. Breaking Points. The rain fell in sheets across Manhattan, turning the city into a watercolor painting of blurred lights and reflections. Avalon stood at the window of her penthouse office in Sweet Revolution's flagship store, watching water stream down the glass as her empire hummed with life below. The Paris location would open in 3 weeks, and her team was in overdrive preparing for the international launch. "Miss Pierce," Arya's voice carried a note of uncertainty she rarely displayed. "You need to see this." Turning from the window, Avalon found her usually unflappable assistant looking decidedly rattled. Outside her office, staff members were clustered around phones and tablets, their expressions a mix of shock and amazement. There, on every screen, was Xavier Pierce, standing in the pouring rain outside Sweet Revolution's entrance. But this was no ordinary publicity stunt. He held a handwritten sign that read, "Some love stories deserve a second draft." "He's been there for an hour," Arya reported, scrolling through her tablet. "Social media is exploding. Sweet Second Chances is trending nationwide. And there's more. More, indeed." As Avalon watched through the security feeds, a truck pulled up, and workers began unloading dozens of flowers, but not just any flowers. These were the rare Japanese ranunculus she'd once mentioned loving during their first date, flowers she'd never been able to find in New York. Somehow he'd remembered. Somehow he'd found them. Arya continued. "The florist just confirmed. Pierce spent months arranging for these to be specially grown and imported. He started the process right after selling his shares in the firm." Another notification pinged, this time from Page 6's Instagram. They'd obtained exclusive footage of Xavier from earlier that morning, helping community garden volunteers plant flowers in the rain before making his way to Sweet Revolution. The caption read, "From power lawyer to garden volunteer, Xavier Pierce's journey of redemption continues." But it wasn't just the flowers. As Avalon watched, more delivery trucks arrived, each carrying pieces of their shared history, reimagined, transformed. The antique French cookbook she'd once admired in a Paris window but couldn't afford during their honeymoon. Now, there were dozens of copies to be donated to culinary schools across the city in her name. "Miss Pierce," Jasper appeared, looking both amused and impressed. "He's arranged for every child in the pediatric ward at Mount Sinai to receive a Sweet Revolution care package every week for the next year. The contracts are already signed and paid for." Each gesture wasn't just a reminder of their past. It was an investment in who she'd become, who they both were becoming. The man who had once dismissed her simple dreams of making people happy through food was now using his resources to help her spread that joy to others. "There's a letter," Arya said softly, holding out a cream-colored envelope. He had it delivered by courier just before he took up his position in the rain. Avalon took the envelope, recognizing Xavier's distinctive handwriting, not the sharp, corporate scrawl he'd developed over years of legal documents, but the softer script she remembered from their college days. "My dearest Avalon, I'm standing in the rain as you read this, not because I expect it to win you back, but because some truths need to be witnessed. Some apologies need to be felt in your bones. I've spent months trying to find the right words, the perfect gesture, but the truth is, there's no perfect way to say, 'I was wrong about everything that mattered.' No grand gesture can erase the pain I caused. What I can say is this. You were never the one who needed to change. You were never just a baker with simple dreams. You were always this magnificent force of nature, this brilliant creator who could turn flour and sugar into magic, who could transform pain into triumph. I lost you because I was too blind to see that your kind of success, the kind that lifts others up, that creates beauty and joy, was worth infinitely more than the hollow victories I chased. The environmental law work I'm doing now, it's not an act. It's not about winning you back. It's about finally becoming the man I was meant to be before I let others' expectations reshape me. The man who fell in love with a girl who believed that making people happy was the highest form of success. Every flower out there represents a memory, not just of us, but of who you've always been. The rare blooms you loved, but never bought because you were saving to open your first bakery. The cookbook you wanted but didn't get because I was too focused on impressing my colleagues with expensive wines. I'm not asking for reconciliation. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. I'm simply standing here in the rain, bearing witness to the extraordinary woman you've always been, and celebrating the empire you've built from the ashes of what I destroyed. You once told me that the best pastries reveal new layers with each bite. I'm finally understanding that the best kind of love does the same. It doesn't try to contain or control. It simply creates space for growth and celebrates each new layer revealed. Whatever happens next, know this. You didn't just rebuild yourself after I broke us. You showed me that it's never too late to strip away the false layers and find your authentic core. With infinite admiration and eternal gratitude, Xavier. Through the window, Avalon could see the crowd growing despite the rain. Social media influencers live-streamed the scene, while traditional news crews jockeyed for position. This would be everywhere within hours. Xavier Pierce, former corporate shark, standing vulnerable in the rain, publicly declaring his admiration for the woman whose heart he'd broken. "The weather forecast shows no sign of the rain letting up," Arya reported quietly. "He's already declined 3 different people who tried to bring him an umbrella." Avalon moved closer to the window, studying the man below. His expensive wool coat was soaked through, his hair plastered to his face, but his posture remained steady, resolute. He wasn't performing for the cameras. His gaze remained fixed on the building, on her, even though he couldn't see through the tinted windows. "Ms. Pierce?" Jasper appeared again. "The team from Tokyo is on the line about the collaboration, and the Paris contractors need approval on the final designs." Life continued. Her empire grew. Success called. But as she turned to head to her conference room, something caught her eye, a small detail in the security feed that the news cameras hadn't captured. At Xavier's feet lay a familiar book, getting slowly ruined by the rain. His copy of The Art of French Pastry, the one she'd given him in law school, filled with her handwritten notes and dreams in the margins. He'd kept it all these years. "Your 3 o'clock is here," Arya reminded gently. "Should I have security ask Mr. Pierce to leave?" Avalon watched another wave of delivery trucks arrive, these carrying ingredients and supplies for local culinary schools, all anonymously donated in Sweet Revolution's name. Each gesture showed not just remorse, but understanding. He wasn't trying to buy her forgiveness. He was investing in the dreams she'd always had, even when he'd been too blind to see them. The rain continued to fall, and somewhere between the past and future, between revenge and redemption, a woman who had built an empire from heartbreak stood at a crossroads, watching a man choose to drown in his regret rather than hide from his truth. "No," she said finally. "Let him stand there. Sometimes the hardest part of transformation is bearing witness to our own breaking points." She turned back to her empire, to her success, to her future. But she carried with her the image of a man in the rain, finally learning that the greatest acts of love sometimes start with the courage to stand still and let the truth wash over you, no matter how much it hurts. Chapter 11. The Truth in Silence. Months had passed since Xavier's rain-soaked vigil outside Sweet Revolution. The Paris location had opened to international acclaim, with critics hailing it as a revolution in modern patisserie. Tokyo was next, with a space already secured in Ginza. Avalon's empire continued to grow, each success sweeter than the last. But on this quiet Sunday morning, as she sat in her penthouse reviewing expansion plans, an unexpected delivery arrived. A weathered leather journal, its pages yellow with age and memories. The note attached, in Victoria Pierce's elegant handwriting, read, "Some truths need time to age properly, like fine wine or perfect pastry. V." Inside, Avalon found her own handwriting from years ago, documenting the early days of her relationship with Xavier. She'd given the journal to Victoria for safekeeping during their engagement, a tradition in the Pierce family. Now, reading those pages was like opening a time capsule to a different life. September 15th, first year of law school. Today I met someone who looks at pastries the way I do, not just as desserts, but as possibilities. Xavier Pierce, third-year law student, future environmental crusader, his words not mine. He doesn't even like sweets, but he sat in the campus cafe for 3 hours, watching me sketch designs for my dream bakery. He gets it. He gets me. The memory hit her with unexpected force. Xavier in his worn jeans and Yale sweatshirt, so different from the polished corporate lawyer he'd become, leaning over her sketches with genuine curiosity. Back then, his ambitions had been about changing the world, not conquering it. A notification pulled her from her reverie. Sweet Revolution's Tokyo Instagram had posted a preview of their location design. The comment section was flooded with anticipation, but one caught her eye. A photo from an environmental law project in Brooklyn, where Xavier was helping establish a rooftop garden for a community center. He looked more alive in his work-stained clothes than he ever had in his $1,000 suits. Turning back to the journal, she found an entry from their first anniversary. "Xavier surprised me today, not with jewelry or expensive gifts, but with a business plan. He actually researched artisanal bakeries, market trends, potential locations. Your dreams aren't simple, he said. They're revolutionary. For the first time, I'm letting myself believe that maybe love and ambition don't have to be separate things. Her phone buzzed. An email from Sage containing a link to a legal blog. The headline read, "Former corporate titan Xavier Pierce wins landmark case for urban agriculture rights." The article detailed how he'd successfully defended a network of community gardens against commercial development, working pro bono. Another page in the journal caught her eye, this one water-stained and wrinkled. Something's changing. Xavier came home late again, talking about client expectations and social obligations. When I showed him my new recipe concepts, he smiled that distracted smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Maybe stick to the classics for now," he said. "Innovation is risky in this market." When did he start seeing my dreams as risks rather than revolutions? "Ms. Pierce?" Arya's voice came through the intercom. "The team from Vogue is here for the Women Redefining Luxury feature." Before Avalon could respond, another message arrived, this time from Victoria. "Have you reached the blue envelope yet?" Flipping through the journal, she found it tucked between the pages, a sealed blue envelope she'd written to herself on her wedding day, meant to be opened on their 10th anniversary. They hadn't made it that far, but perhaps now was the time. Inside, her younger self had written, "Dear future me, today, I marry a man who sees possibilities where others see problems, who understands that dreams don't have to be practical to be worth chasing. If you're reading this on our 10th anniversary, I hope we've built something extraordinary together. Not just a marriage or a business, but a legacy of believing in each other's revolutions. But if something's changed, if the man who once spent hours designing your dream bakery on cafe napkins has forgotten how to dream, remember this moment. Remember that love, like pastry, requires both structure and creativity. Too much of either, and it crumbles. Most importantly, remember that you are not just Xavier Pierce's wife. You are a revolutionary in your own right. Your dreams are not simple. They're symphonies waiting to be played. Love, the girl who dares to dream. Her phone lit up with another notification, a tweet from a food critic who'd visited both the Paris and New York locations. What sets Sweet Revolution apart isn't just the innovation in pastry, it's the philosophy behind it. Each creation tells a story of transformation, of daring to reimagine what's possible. Attached was a photo of her signature dessert, the Phoenix Rising, now famous worldwide. But there was something else in the image that caught her eye. In the background, barely visible through the store window, was Xavier. Not posing, not trying to be seen, just standing there with a paper cup of coffee, looking at the display with what appeared to be pride. "Miss Pierce," Jasper appeared at her door. "We've finalized the new collection for Tokyo. Would you like to see?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Sage. "Just ran into your ex at the farmer's market. He was teaching kids about sustainable agriculture. Never thought I'd say this, but he seems genuinely happy. Different. Real." The journal still lay open on her desk, its pages breathing memories into the sleek modern space of her office. Another entry caught her eye, this one from their last happy period. "Xavier was different today. We walked through Central Park, and he actually stopped to watch a street performer creating sugar art. 'It's like magic,' he said. And for a moment I saw that boy from the cafe again, the one who believed in possibilities. I wish we could freeze this moment, keep this version of us forever." A gentle knock interrupted her reading. Victoria. Pierce stood in the doorway, elegant as ever in Chanel. "I see you found my delivery," she said, stepping into the office. "You know, Xavier kept a journal too. He gave it to me after everything. Would you like to know what he wrote the day he met you?" Avalon hesitated, then nodded. Met a girl today who sees the world like it's waiting to be transformed. She looks at simple ingredients and sees symphonies. When she talks about her dreams, it's like watching someone paint with light. For the first time in my life, success feels too small a word for what I want to achieve. Not just career success, but the kind of success that makes the world more beautiful. Victoria placed another journal on the desk, this one bound in dark leather, its pages filled with Xavier's handwriting. "Read it," she said softly. "Not because he deserves forgiveness, but because sometimes understanding is its own kind of closure." As Victoria left, another notification lit up Avalon's phone. Sweet Revolution's Paris location had been awarded its first Michelin star. The acclaim, the success, the vindication of every dream she'd ever dared to dream. It was all there. But as she sat in her office, surrounded by the evidence of her triumph, Avalon found herself opening Xavier's journal, ready to understand not just what she'd lost, but what they'd both found in the breaking. The first entry was dated just days after their wedding. "I promise to never let ambition blind me to magic, to never forget that the girl who dreams of revolutionary pastries is the most revolutionary thing that's ever happened to me." Below that, in different ink written years later, "I broke every promise. But watching her rise from the ashes of us, I finally understand. Some revolutions begin with endings." Outside her office, Sweet Revolution hummed with life and possibility, but in the quiet of this moment, surrounded by the written echoes of who they'd been and who they'd become, Avalon began to understand that some truths can only be heard in silence. Chapter 12. Full Circle. The small park near their old apartment looked different in the golden light of sunset. Avalon stood by the wrought iron gates, watching children play near the fountain where Xavier had proposed 8 years ago. She'd chosen this spot for their meeting deliberately, not for its romantic history, but because it represented a crossroads of who they'd been and who they'd become. She was early, giving herself time to process the whirlwind of the past year. Sweet Revolution had become a global phenomenon, with locations in Paris, Tokyo, and soon Dubai. Her recent Forbes cover story had dubbed her the Queen of Culinary Innovation. But success, she'd learned, was sweetest when it didn't define you. Xavier arrived exactly on time, looking both familiar and transformed. Gone was the power suit armor he'd once worn like a second skin. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that spoke of comfort rather than status. His eyes, though, they were different, clearer, more like the law student who'd once spent hours listening to her dream about revolutionary pastries. "Thank you for coming," he said softly, keeping a respectful distance. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't either," she admitted, noting how he carried himself differently now. Less like someone trying to own the space and more like someone comfortable simply existing within it. They walked in silence toward the fountain, where the setting sun turned the water into liquid gold. A street vendor was selling roasted chestnuts nearby, the scent triggering memories of their first winter together. "I've been reading our old journals," Avalon began, watching a young couple share a bag of chestnuts, their laughter echoing across the park. "It's strange, seeing who we were, who we became, who we are now." Xavier nodded, his hands in his pockets, a gesture she remembered from their college days before corporate posture coaches had trained it out of him. "Victoria gave you mine too, didn't she?" "She did." Avalon turned to face him fully. "I needed to understand something that's been bothering me since your rain-soaked vigil outside Sweet Revolution. The man in those journal entries, the one who believed in changing the world, who saw magic in street performers making sugar art, what happened to him?" "He got lost," Xavier said quietly. "Somewhere between trying to live up to my father's legacy and society's expectations, I forgot that the biggest revolutions often start with the smallest dreams. It took losing everything I thought I wanted to remember what I actually needed. A child's laughter pierced the evening air as someone succeeded in splashing their sibling near the fountain. Avalon watched them play, remembering simpler times. "Your environmental law work," she said. "The community gardens, the sustainability projects. That's not just for show, is it?" "No," he smiled, and for the first time in years it reached his eyes. "Last week we helped a group of inner-city kids plant their first vegetable garden. One little girl looked at a tomato seedling like it was pure magic. It reminded me of how you used to look at simple ingredients, like you could see all their potential for transformation." "I've seen the media coverage," Avalon acknowledged. "The former corporate shark turned environmental warrior. It's quite the story." "I'm not doing it for the story," Xavier said firmly. "I'm doing it because for the first time since law school, I feel like I'm creating something meaningful, something that makes the world a little more beautiful, like you always have." They reached the fountain, its spray creating miniature rainbows in the fading light. Avalon touched the water, letting it run through her fingers. "I needed to thank you," she said finally, turning back to him. "Your betrayal broke something in me that needed breaking. The woman you left would have never become who I am today." "And who are you today?" Xavier asked softly, echoing their past conversations, but with new understanding in his voice. "Someone who knows her worth," Avalon replied, watching the last rays of sun paint the sky in shades of possibility. "Someone who understands that true love, whether it's for another person or for yourself, should add to who you are, not diminish you." Xavier stepped closer, hope flickering in his eyes, but tempered with new wisdom. "And is there room in that understanding for second chances?" Avalon looked at him thoughtfully. The anger that had fueled her transformation had burned away, leaving something clearer in its place. Wisdom. "Second chances aren't given, Xavier," she said gently. "They're earned. Start with friendship. Start with proving that you can see me, really see me, for who I am now, not who you want me to be. Start with understanding that if we try again, it won't be a continuation of our old story. It will be a completely new book." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Inside was a perfect miniature version of her signature Phoenix Rising dessert, crafted personally by her hands that morning. "This isn't just a dessert," she explained, opening the box. "It's a metaphor. Each layer represents a different stage of transformation. The base is bitter chocolate, like the truth we had to face. The middle layers are various intensities of sweetness and complexity, like the journey we've taken. The top, well, that's crystallized honey, because sometimes the sweetest things come from letting pain transform into something new." Xavier took the offered dessert, understanding the significance of the gesture. In all their years together, she'd never created something specifically for him. "Try it," she encouraged. "Really taste each layer, because that's what I'm offering. Not a quick reconciliation, but a chance to discover each layer of who we've become, slowly, thoughtfully." He took a bite, and she watched his expression change as each flavor revealed itself. "It's complex," he said finally. "Beautiful. A little bit challenging. Like life," she smiled. "Like growth. Like real love." As the stars began to appear above Manhattan's skyline, they sat on the fountain's edge, sharing the dessert that told their story of transformation. No photographers captured this moment. No social media influencers live-streamed it. This was just for them. Two people who had to lose each other to find themselves, now discovering if their individual revolutions could create a new kind of harmony. "I have a new dream," Xavier said suddenly, looking up at the emerging stars. "Not about status or success, but about making a difference. And this time, I want to build it alongside your dreams, not in competition with them. Avalon considered his words, feeling the weight of their history and the lightness of possibility. Then let's start with a cup of coffee, she suggested. Tomorrow morning, you can tell me about your latest environmental project, and I'll tell you about my plans for sustainable pastry packaging. We'll see where the conversation leads. One layer at a time, he asked, understanding. One layer at a time, she confirmed, standing up. Because the best revolutions, like the best recipes, can't be rushed. They need time to develop, to prove, to rise. As they walked out of the park, the city lights twinkling around them like earthbound stars, Avalon felt a sense of peace settle over her. This wasn't an ending or a beginning. It was something rarer and more valuable, a chance to write a new story with the wisdom of the old one. Sweet Revolution is launching a new collection next week, she said casually as they reached the park gates. It's called Full Circle. Each piece tells a story of transformation, second chances, and the courage to begin again. Xavier smiled, understanding the invitation, hidden in her words. I'll be there, he promised. Not as your ex-husband, not as a potential future, but as someone who believes in your revolution. Always has, even when I forgot how to show it. They parted ways under the New York sky, each heading toward their separate homes, but connected by something new, not the passionate love of their youth or the broken promises of their past, but the mature understanding that sometimes life's sweetest creations come from letting go of the recipe you thought you needed and daring to create something entirely new. Subscribe if you liked.